That was not the Grange as Hamilton knew it. It was too crowded by neighboring buildings. The front and rear entrances had been removed, the staircase had been relocated, and there had been many other changes since Hamilton's time. When the National Park Service was given responsibility for Hamilton Grange in 1962, we were told by Congress to find a place where it could be fully restored, move it there, and recreate Hamilton's vision of a country retreat in Harlem away from the hustle and bustle of downtown. That was not so easy. It took the support and encouragement of this fine community, the city of New York, and many of you to find the right location. It took the commitment of the federal government to provide adequate funding. And it took the expertise of house movers, project managers, architects, builders, craftsmen, curators, rangers, maintenance and administrative staff to bring this vision to life. There are far too many for me to name them all today. But to each one I want to say, congratulations on a job well done, and thank you. Now, after a long journey, we have arrived. As you can see, the house is again in balance with the piazzas on either side of the elaborate front entrance, and 13 sweet gum trees adorning its grounds, just as in Hamilton's day. The symmetry is a hallmark of the federal style, and in Hamilton's time, the federal style represented the emerging American national identity. And of course, Alexander Hamilton was one of the creators of this American identity. Today, Constitution Day, we are honoring this lesser known, but no less important founding father. A leader who was not only one of the signers of the Constitution, but co-author of the Federalist Papers, the strongest argument for its ratification. Yep. His belief in a strong federal government influences us through the Constitution. A Constitution that formed a republic that has outlasted all others. Hamilton Grange represents both fine architecture and an enduring memorial to an immigrant, soldier, statesman, and consummate New Yorker. However, it was always home for his family, and foremost, a stylish and graceful place to entertain his guests. And finally, it rewarded Hamilton's lifelong struggle to achieve the social acceptance and stable family environment so lacking in his own early life. I thank you for joining us today and hope that you will enjoy getting to know Alexander Hamilton a little better as you discover his home as he dreamed it and lived it. Thank you. Now, I'd like to introduce our Master of Ceremonies, our Chief of Cultural Resources, historian extraordinaire, the man with all the answers, Steve Lace.
Thank you, Shirley. You know, as Shirley mentioned, today is Constitution Day, 224th anniversary of the signing of the Constitution. And as we all know, the only signer from New York was Alexander Hamilton. I think that it's extraordinary that we had the opportunity to restore and reopen his home on a day that has so much significance to his life and through him to us. This is really a special day for a lot of reasons. We'd like to begin by asking you to rise, please, for the presentation of the colors, and that will be by the New York City Army ROTC group. And then if you remain standing, we'll have the national anthem presented by the Boys and Girls Choir of Harlem Alumni Ensemble. And then finally, if you continue to stand, and I promise this won't take all that long, we're going to have the blessing by Executive Minister James B. Logan from our neighboring Common Avenue Baptist Church. So, gentlemen, we'll have the presentation of the colors. Reverend Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Lace. I want to recognize all of our representatives here today. Very briefly, Honorable Rangel, as well as our Councilman Jackson, all political and community leaders, invited guests and friends. On behalf of Reverend Dr. Jesse D. Williams, Jr., the senior pastor of the Common Avenue Baptist Church, in which we are located on 145th Street, the church on the hill, as we're known, we want to just let you know that it's an honor to be able to share this wonderful occasion. I'd ask you to pause just for a few moments. I realize that you're standing and it won't be long, but we just want to have a brief prayer dedication of this property. Oh God, we thank you for such a wonderful day in which we gather to reflect on the life and legacy of Alexander Hamilton. We pray that you will honor this day, that you honor his legacy, that you will allow us as a community to be transformed constantly as we walk by this edifice. But as we walk by this edifice, let it be a reminder of justice, a reminder of peace, a reminder of the power of knowledge, the value of education. Let it be a reminder that we should continue to press forward against all adversities that we may experience in life. It is our prayer as we commit this building to you, this Grange. We believe that you will use it as a great symbol of this country to help us to be drawn closer together as a community of people, representing love, representing peace, representing hope. We commit the grounds to you, every door, every wall, every floor. We commit to you, knowing that you see all things, you know all things, and you can do anything but fail. Thank you for this opportunity and experience that we have today as we celebrate such a wonderful occasion. It is in thy name that we pray and dedicate this Grange to you. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Ogun. I think we at the Park Service share that sense of mission and purpose for the Grange and for our programs here. Before introducing our first speaker, I wanted to acknowledge the presence of Captain Gregory Hitchen of the U.S. Coast Guard. Captain Hitchen, could you just step out for a moment? And as most of you know, there's a strong historical connection between Alexander Hamilton and the U.S. Coast Guard. As Secretary of the Treasury, he created the Customs Service that was designed to prevent smuggling and also to collect customs duties. And the Revenue Cutter Service that he created has evolved over time and has become part of the heritage of the U.S. Coast Guard. So thank you very much for joining us today. I'd like to begin the speakers part of our program by introducing Marianne Gerbakis, who is a good friend of ours, National Park Service from our regional office in Philadelphia. Let me just say a few words about Marianne. She serves as the Associate Regional Director for Heritage Preservation, Planning, and Compliance for the National Park Service in the Northeast region. This region is the most densely populated, ethnically diverse area in the United States, offering park experiences to 55 million people at 76 different park units, which represent approximately 20% of the entire national park system. Given the magnitude of this resource, the cultural resource programs that have been established to assist our parks and partners in the Northeast have become national leaders in cultural resource management. As a matter of fact, this Gerbakis preservation team has been instrumental in the success of the restoration project here at Hamilton Grange. So this is very meaningful to us personally to have you here. Thanks for coming, Marianne. Marianne Gerbakis.
Thank you, Steve. I am very happy to join you today to represent the Northeast Regional Office of the National Park Service for several reasons. First, as the former superintendent of the Thomas Edison National Historical Park, I have always been impressed by Alexander Hamilton's creativity and inventiveness, as seen particularly in his creation of the Society for Useful Manufacturing in Paterson, New Jersey, soon also to be a National Park Service site. And as a native New Yorker and a current Philadelphian, I am thrilled to look out of my office window each day and see the First Bank of the United States, the original piece of the federal banking system proposed by Hamilton. A cheer for that, too. Independence, NHP. And as the Associate Regional Director, whose portfolio includes the historic preservation of some of the most significant parts of our nation's heritage, places like Independence Hall and the Gettysburg Battlefield, I take a great deal of pride in counting Hamilton Grange among the jewels of this system, and that many of my staff and colleagues, yes, it deserves a hand, and that many of my staff and colleagues in the regional office had a hand in its move and preservation. Congress named the Grange a national memorial in 1962 and dictated that it be moved to a fitting location. And here it is in the city park, which sits within the footprint of Hamilton's original estate. This project is a prime example of the federal government knowing that we needed many partners to make it a reality. Partnering with community, certainly, but also with the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation. It took patience, it took money, but money with a return. Nationally, every $1 invested in our national parks returns between $4 and $5 to the local economy. So I certainly commend Congress for investing your tax money wisely. I like to think on this 222nd anniversary of the signing of the Constitution that Hamilton would look upon this project as a wonderful example of the executive and legislative branches of the federal government working together for the benefit of we, the people. Whoops. Okay, and we have a Hamilton to save it appropriately. Thank you.
Country and its history is far more important than elections. It's far more important than Democrats and Republicans. How we treat each other is not just for Americans. We are the symbol of democracy and freedom throughout the world. Alexander Hamilton played a role in all of this. And now those principles are still the ones that we search to see how we can find that unity, that understanding, to put what he stood for as a priority than what a handful of mean-spirited people would want this country to look like. I want those of you to know that the Revolutionary War didn't stop when history said it recalled. It was right here in this community when people said, now that we got the hope, now that the National Park Service is going to provide the expertise and the ability to move this mansion and make it everything that Alexander wanted it to be, now where is that spot? Because the family is here, I would not share with them any of the details of that war. All I can tell you is that Pastor Grant from Convent Avenue Baptist Church was one of our spiritual leaders to make certain that this war was kept local. And Pastor Johnson of the church across the street, they felt like we were just taking something away from them. And our friends from Pennsylvania, can you imagine bringing a building like this up into the ear and bringing it down a hill and placing it here? Well, all of these things, we were privileged as Americans, but just as important as people from Harlem, in making certain that the Harlem Village, the Harlem community, we want to represent the same things that our forefathers in Alexander did. Fairness, a land of immigrants, a land of hope, a land that allows people to dream for the future. Some of the people on the front lines of this fight were our community people. It's so good to be refereeing a fight where you know that they all want the same result, and that is a beautiful place for the memories of one of our great heroes. So we have here, and I would ask to stand, Gil Rose Bartholomew, who's the president of the Hamilton Heights Homeowner Association. They had a lot to say about this. In the struggle, of course, was Arnold Boatner. He's the former president. And how in the world do you think we got in a New York City park? I mean, the National Park Service, they think they're the biggest in the world, but when you live in New York City, they'll tell you the park commissioners can do it. But because we have such outstanding people in our city council that work with each other, when Bob Jackson, the city councilman, come forward, Bob, when he said that, hey, that's my park representing the district, he made it possible to get that out. And of course, our former governor, who was in the state senate working in partnership with Keith Wright, our assemblyman, made certain that our governor and the state legislature didn't have a problem here. So a little piece of this history all of you can take home with you. That you fought, you prayed, you hoped to have it. But even more precious, we have the presence here today of the family of Alexander Hamilton. And I hope they would stand, please. And we promise to preserve this national monument. And because we are in the middle of a national economic crisis that we need some hope, and because we are now going back to the beginning of this great nation and recognize our responsibility to the generation that follows us, I would like to close this program and thank you by the presentation of Alexander Hamilton II. Will you come forward, Alexander? He's a little surprised. Alexander, welcome. You're here from Ohio, right? And you are the 7th generation. And your name?
Grant.
Alexander Hamilton. So anyway, this group is here. This group is here to make certain that you'll be able to go back to school and tell them what the great job they did. And I hear that you wanted to say thank you. You do.
Thank you. Okay, so I have to tell you something.
I knew this was coming.
My 7th grade grip was on a $10 bill.
Well, Alexander would be proud of you, but I'm very serious in saying, don't we have an obligation to this generation? Yes. Isn't his future more important than who wins the next election? Yes. Don't we really have to keep our country together so that one day he'll be able to stand up and say that he was the connecting factor between our fathers and the greatness that this country will and can achieve. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Congressman Rangel, and thank you, young Alexander Hamilton. We look forward to seeing a great deal more from you in the future. Our next speaker is Parks Commissioner Adrian Benepe. Adrian has worked nearly 30 years protecting and enhancing New York City's natural and historic beauty. He's continued this effort as Commissioner of the Department of Parks and Recreation. He was appointed by Mayor Michael R. Bloomberg in January of 2002. In this role, he is focused on improving park facilities and programs for children, developing new waterfront parks and greenways, and making New York City bloom with millions of new flowers and hundreds of gardens. Commissioner Benepe has spearheaded Million Trees NYC, a citywide public-private program with an ambitious goal to plant and care for 1 million new trees across the city in the next decade. Please take a look around the site here today, and you will see several young trees that were donated to the park by the City Parks Department as a result of this initiative. I have to say, as you know, this is a city park, and a number of our national park units, historic sites in New York City, are tenants. We occupy land within New York City parks, and this gives us an unusual opportunity to have really sincere partnerships with city parks. It's just been wonderful. I think that in every instance we found a magnificent amount of cooperation and support and encouragement wherever we have tried to make an improvement to our facility that's located in the city park. So it's a really special pleasure to welcome Adrian Benepe today.
Thank you, Steve. I always look forward to these events because I try to anticipate what kind of a costume Steve will be wearing. And he's a man of many costumes. Sometimes it's Civil War, sometimes it's Revolutionary War. I'd love to see his wardrobe someday. What a pleasure it is to be here, and how fitting that it's a beautiful day. And an honor to be here with Congressman Rangel. And I will tell you this. thank goodness that Charlie stayed with us as congressman, because this project would never have happened. It's that simple. If he had gone on to something else, someone else, there wouldn't have been somebody with his persistence to have made this happen. And we, in the City Parks Department, provided the land to move this house into, and it was an enormously complicated legal negotiation. For those of you who have done any kind of legal negotiations, try to imagine what it's like for the city to do an easement to the federal government to, in perpetuity, have a house. It's not easy. And we did this here. We did this at Grant's Tomb. We have similar arrangements at Castle Clinton. But always having Charlie taking care of us and making sure that whenever we hit a roadblock, and that most important, and this is something that we should underscore, making sure the money was there, and making sure that our federal tax dollars, which we send in large amounts to Washington, but which dribble back in small amounts to us, making sure that this came back in a large amount. That was no small trick. And there are people who denigrate the use of federal funds in local areas, but let's remember where those federal funds came from. They came from us, from our taxes. So he was a genius at getting the money for this and making sure the money stayed there. And as some of you were here, who was here on the day of the house moving? Raise a hand. A lot of people. Remember, wasn't that amazing? Up on those wheels, all the computerized things. I think it was the Hutterite brethren who came here with the straw hats, and the whole family was out here. And as it turned the corner on those wheels, was coming down the hill, I had this vision of something from a black and white movie of the house just sort of rolling down the hill and not stopping until it gets to the Harlem River. And everyone saying, "Look out, look out!" That didn't happen. It somehow, miraculously, thanks to amazing work of the National Park Service and the architects and the conservationists and these great farmers, house movers, and made it into the park. And then the difficult work of seating it here and having a landscape grow up around it. We are thrilled, just thrilled to have it here. It brings life to the St. Nicholas Park, one of the 4 historic Harlem parks that lines the heights here. A park that has its own rich history, full of wonderful, amazing trees. By the way, I'll point out these new trees here, part of the million trees. These are liquid ambar styrofolia, otherwise known as sweet gum, a great native tree, a very historic tree, and a totally appropriate tree to have in this historic setting. I think, you never want to assume, but I'd like to think that Hamilton would be pleased at what has happened to his house here. He wrote a letter to Charles Cotsworth Pinckney, who is a fellow Federalist. He says, "A garden, you know, is a very usual refuge of a disappointed politician. Accordingly, I have purchased a few acres about 9 miles from town then being somewhere way downtown, 9 miles south of here, have built a house and I'm cultivating a garden." He was in fact a very enthusiastic gardener, and these gardens which are coming in here now will be a tribute to his work as a gardener. The Grange also shares a great common history. This building, this edifice, this work of architecture with other historic buildings in the city. He helped to design, among others, Castle Clinton, which is a federal monument, also in a city park downtown. City Hall, a place some of us have spent some time in. The council member, the assembly member, the congressman have all spent some time in City Hall. And Gracie Mansion, another place that we've spent some time in. These are some of the oldest structures in Manhattan and all share a common architect. I have a 45-minute speech here, which I'll dispense with, which goes into great detail about Hamilton's history. Columbia University, a member of the New York Militia, New York State Legislature, one of 3 delegates to the Constitutional Convention, the only New Yorker to sign the Constitution, just so much. Founding the New York Evening Post, now the New York Post, at a meeting that took place at Gracie Mansion with one of the paper's principal investors, Archibald Gracie, who built the Gracie Mansion there. Wrote the Constitution for the Bank of New York so much, and you will learn all about it as you go into the house. Jefferson was not a terrific friend of Hamilton's, but he did write, perhaps grudgingly, in writing to James Madison, "Hamilton is really a colossus. Without numbers, he is a host within himself." a truly outstanding New Yorker, and we are so pleased to have played a role in making sure that this great Harlem landmark comes out from its cramped quarters and into this beautiful Harlem Park, and will continue to play an even larger and more expanded role in this great neighborhood. I'm humbled to have played a small role. And let me just quickly thank somebody who works at the Parks Department, Joshua Laird, our Assistant Commissioner, who's here with his sons Ethan and Maxwell. He worked many years on this complicated deal of the land exchange with the people in his office. And our great Manhattan Borough Commissioner, Bill Castro, who also worked to make sure the house got in here. Bill and Joshua, thank you. Along with Steve Simon, Chief of Staff of Manhattan Parks. And let me finish by thanking all of you here in the neighborhood for your encouragement of this, for your patience as we got it done, and a final thank you to our great colleagues in the National Park Service. There's never been a better or stronger relationship between the federal park system and the city park system than there is today, and we are proud to be partners going forward in this park. Thank you all very much.
Absolutely right, Adrian. It's an unusual and highly successful partnership. Our next speaker is Douglas Hamilton, becoming a familiar name around here now. Doug is the fifth great-grandson of Alexander and Elizabeth Hamilton. For the last 35 years of his professional career, he's been in the field of information technology. His hobbies include genealogy, his own family for primary example, and early American history, and spending time with his grandchildren. He's a member of the SAR, the Sons of the American Revolution, and the Society of the Cincinnati. Doug lives in Westerville, Ohio, and his wife Debbie, and close by are their children Alexander and Elizabeth, with 4 grandchildren and another one on the way, I understand. Let me just say that the first time we met Doug Hamilton was in 2004, when he was in town for the commemoration of the bicentennial of the duel between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr. And Doug took the role of his ancestor, Alexander, and they reenacted the duel, and unfortunately he was killed. But I'm pleased to see that he's made a good recovery from that. And Doug, come on up. Nice to hear from you.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate the introduction. You know, I usually am getting shot at, and I usually die, and so far I haven't died yet, but give me a chance. First, you know, good morning to all you ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here. Congressman Rangel, thank you. Congressman Benepe, you know, thank you for being here and helping make this happen. I'd like to give a particular thanks to the National Park Service. You know, and all the people that worked, all their energy and dedication to get this thing, this house, Hamilton Grange, back to its glory from 210 years ago. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So Steve said, I am a 5th great grandson of Alexander Hamilton, and when I was growing up, I was told that being a descendant of Hamilton and 25 cents would get me a cup of coffee. That was back in the 60s. And I'm here today to say that we've come a long way. When I came in this morning, they asked for my name. I gave them my name. I figured maybe that would help me a little bit. And I asked what the admission fee was. They said, oh, no, Mr. Hamilton, you can go in free today. So I guess there are some monetary benefits to being a Hamilton descendant. So this morning, as was mentioned, I had the privilege of representing about 18 Hamilton descendants, along with their families, and also another 250 Hamilton descendants, living descendants. About 150 have deceased, and there's another 100 in there that we're not exactly sure what their status is. I'm pretty sure they're not here today, but we just haven't recorded what their death date was. But that would mean that over 230 years, there's about 500 descendants of Alexander and Elizabeth Schuyler Hamilton. The topic I was asked to talk to you a couple minutes today at this awesome occasion as a representative of the family is, what did Alexander Hamilton mean to us? Now, I won't claim to have talked to all the relatives here, but because of what we have in common, we are all descendants of Hamilton. taking a leap that it's only natural that we share some common positions about the family and the ancestors we have. Some of you have seen the program, the TV program sponsored by Ancestry.com. It's called Who Do You Think You Are? Where famous people get their family history traced back and they make some link to an incredible event. For some, it was the revelation that their ancestors lived through the potato famine in Ireland, or they lived through or died during the Holocaust, or they struggled as slaves during that period of time in our country. These people come away from that genealogical experience with a different perspective of their family, their life, their country, and the world that I think is mostly attributed to the fact that for them it's now personal. They have this personal connection to some event in history. Now, some of you know something about Alexander Hamilton, and you can imagine the breadth of American Revolutionary era history that descendants have to use that ancestral connection to make that historical connection. These historical connections can be people, places, things, relationships. The list could go on. It could be just about anything, and it usually piques our interest in some aspect of that individual's life. And when you think, and when something like that personally interests you, you get to know the person a little bit better, and you get to make some judgments about that person. For us, Alexander Hamilton was a gold mine, and I'm going to use this house as an example. He called this his country retreat in an early letter. Some people refer to it as his sweet project. The fact is, this is the only house that he built and the only house that he owned. He loved this house.